Hi, this is Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Interarbor Solutions, and you're listening to BriefingsDirect. Cyber attacks are on the rise, harming brands and supply chains while fomenting consumer and employee distrust, as well as leading to costly interruptions and service blackouts. At the same time, more remote workers and extended enterprise processes due to the pandemic demand higher levels of security across all kinds of business workflows. Stay with us now as we explore why comprehensive cloud security solutions need to go beyond on-premises threat detection and remediation to significantly strengthen extended digital business workflows. To learn more about ways to shrink the attack surface and dynamically isolate process security breaches, please join me now in welcoming our guests. We're here with Carl Klessig, Director of Product Marketing for Security Operations at ServiceNow. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you so much.
We're also here with E.G. Pearson, Security Architect at Unisys. Welcome, E.G.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Carl, why are digital workflows so essential now for modern enterprises, and why are better security solutions needed to strengthen these digital businesses?
So it's a great question, and I'll go back to some of your opening comments, Dana, when you touched on the cyber attacks on the rise, et cetera. There's some really scary highlights that we can tie into what we're going to talk about today. If you think about like MGM Resort, some of the real big hitters in 2020 that just took us all by surprise, 10.6 million guests on a hacking forum. And then the drive to all of us that are sitting here having this discussion, 23% of consumers had their email or social media accounts hacked, taken over, or used. These are all huge drivers to our everyday life, period, as business and as consumers, right? So as we look at this, when you think about why must they do this, we think about the fact that, look, overnight we went digital. And when we look at so many of us working from home, this huge surface space, they have a trend that's going to continue. You know, in a recent Gardner CFO survey, 74% of companies said they intend to shift employees to work from home permanently. These are huge numbers of real drivers for this, as we've commented on this mad dash to build and scale remote work infrastructures. So all contributing to that. So where is the value and why is it so important? It's because at the end of the day, these teams that we and EJ represent as vendors, we strive hard to support these businesses that are trying to go ahead and be able to scale and be able to quickly address what is an explosive impact to cyber resilience and cyber operations in their enterprise.
So, E.G., we have these new rapidly evolving adoption patterns around digital businesses and workflows. Do IT and security personnel who will perhaps cut their teeth in the legacy security requirements business, do they need to think differently? Do they have different requirements now?
As someone who did cut their teeth in the legacy parts of all that good stuff, I would say that, yeah, let's jump into this world because things are new, things are different, and we don't have to, the legacy world was all about, in my opinion, it was kind of one of those things of all about, let's protect what I know, how I do it, and I don't want to change. The new world is all about automation, right? Everything that we want to do and everything that we can do, why wouldn't we try to make our jobs as simple and easy as possible? One of the biggest things I remember was whenever I first got into IT, one of my friends told me the easiest thing you can do is script everything that you possibly can, just to make your life simple. Nowadays, with the way digital workflow is going, it's not just to where we can automate the processes for simple things. Now we're getting into where it's very easy to automate the complex. And we're making it to where anybody can jump in and get this going as quickly as possible. Yeah, wholeheartedly.
Carl, are the security issues that we're dealing with now around digital workflows and around this expanded, almost definitionless workplace, it can be anywhere. How has the security challenge changed? What are we up against?
So the security challenge has changed dramatically, a bit more on what we touched on earlier, and represents almost that. We all talked IoT. What's the impact of IoT? And I'm sure we'll touch on that some more today as we're talking, but essentially created that surface area. And what's changed, and I think in a very positive way, is that it's driven that automation and those workflows and the ability to go ahead and not only support all of us on automatic workflows and secure them and this remote surface area, but it's driven us to go ahead and collaborate on those workflows. And I know we'll touch some more on that later, but at the end of the day, when you think about the ability to go ahead and be able to quickly detect respond, remediate, etc. When you look at what security's role is as we roll out all this automated and essentially, let's be honest, very disjointed and remote solutions that are now utilized by overnight thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people versus a small amount of us working remotely before, that's a huge impact for them to take on. So when we touch more on automation, it's going to be the driver. It's going to be what really rises to the top to help them in this.
You know, E.G., I suppose one of the good things, too, with the modern landscape is we can do remote access for security in ways that we couldn't before. So for IoT, as Carl mentioned, we're talking about branch offices, not just necessarily sensors or machines. We're having a very distributed environment, and yet we can get in there with our security apparatus, and it's virtual in a sense. So we have automation, but we also have the need for virtually being just about everywhere. How do you see that extended and distributed environment being managed from a security perspective?
Well, nowadays it's moving beyond, like you said. I mean, IoT is huge. OT is huge. SCADA is huge. Take your pick on what you want to say is huge about all that. I mean, just it's massive in scope nowadays. But yeah, branch offices to that effect. Nowadays, all of us are kind of our own branch office, right? The way we're all sitting at home.
Well said, EJ.
I can't imagine admitting at this point because every day that you'd walk in, it's a new challenge because dealing with somebody who's out and about, you've got a few people who were out and about working in the past, field employees. Now everybody's a field employee and the world changed. I mean, overnight, the world changed. And I think the biggest concerns with that really do revolve around, like you said, how do we protect those folks? How do we protect every branch office, every individual who's out there, when it used to be really simple? You used to be able to create a site-to-site VPN, or you used to be able to do something to where you had communication that could be easily taken care of. Now you have worlds where the communication is open to everybody because your kids are wanting to watch Disney in the living room while you're trying to do work in your office, while your wife is doing something else, doing work for her job in three rooms down. The world is different. The networks that we have to interact with and work through are different. And that really comes down to being able to now, instead of trying to protect an all-encompassing environment, now it's coming down to where we're moving into more individual or granular security of having to protect individual endpoints or individual systems. That also includes IoT and OT. I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I have smart thermostats and a smart doorbell, for God's sakes, and stuff like that. I don't want anybody attaching to those. I don't need somebody talking to my kids through those things. In the same vein, I don't need somebody attaching to my company's OT environment and doing something silly inside of there. So yeah, it's become less, in my opinion, less about the overarching environment and more about how to protect the individual.
All right. Well, as we start to think about how to protect the individual, let's look at the solution from a higher level, in that we can't do it the old way. There has to be some new ways. There has to be some new technologies, some new methods. Tell me about the Unisys Stealth and the ServiceNow platform coming together to help solve these issues. Let's start with you, Carl. What's coming together between Unisys and ServiceNow that can rise to this challenge?
There are a couple items that I'd like to touch on. And E.G., I love where you went with essentially we are all branch offices, right? That's kind of what's going through my head as you were talking. It nailed it well. And there's a couple of areas I'll touch on, as I mentioned. One is that when it comes to Unisys and ServiceNow, as Unisys has this uncanny ability to go ahead and be able to do the isolation and do some of those initial approaches to a breach and a threat that actually contain it. That is absolutely paramount for our customers and for all of us out there to get a very quick handle on how to respond, what do we investigate, et cetera, because our teams are all struggling to scale faster and faster with higher volume. So every minute bought is a huge minute gained. And that's one of the things that we, quite frankly, feed off each other right out of the gate between Unisys and ServiceNow. It buys us that time, and every second counts, and it's invaluable. And I would touch on the fact, too, that one of the things that's driven is not just our solutions, which is fantastic, but also at the end of the day, the ties to IT and security are much more collaborative. We had this long time run where they tend to be in separate towers, so to speak, but the codependencies, the collaborative drivers that we see, no longer can the data and the actions and the tie-ins, even the capabilities like we talk about with Unisys and ServiceNow today, all of those are so much more effective if the IT and security teams collaborate as well. And that's one of the things that we do in the workflows of the automation of both of our solutions extremely efficiently and effectively.
E.g., what about some of your technology, your dynamic isolation for stealth, for example? Why is that a good fit with ServiceNow? And why is that also a powerful part of this automation drive?
It's a great question, Dana. If you don't mind, I'm going to back it up a little bit on that. So the nice part about dynamic isolation is it is a piece of what we can do as a whole. And as a whole, what stealth really is, or stealth core, the product is what it's doing, is it is identity-based microsegmentation. And by that nature, it really flows into being software-defined networking. And it's based on that zero trust model, or using zero trust. Least privilege is a big part of what that is. The reason that's important is, number one, software-defined networking, we're gaining a lot of information. We're gathering tons of good stuff of what's happening across your network. So you've got stuff that's happening at the perimeter with firewalls and all that good stuff, but very rarely are you able to get really, really good granular information about what's happening inside your environment. So we're able to gather that, and we're able to send that. Number one, we can send all of that fantastic information over to ServiceNow to be able to put into your SIEM, your SOAR, whatever it may be. So ServiceNow is working as a fantastic jumping point for us to be able to get all that information into what would be separate systems, which can now all talk together through the ServiceNow platform. Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the nature of what we're doing.
That is dead on, EJ. Thank you. And to add to that, and I love the road you went down, because at the end of the day, what that tells the story of is, Dana, all the discussions that we had with EJ and I up to now talk about that volume, right? Well, how can you meet that volume if you're not prioritizing accurately because you're inundated? And you just described the perfect scenario, which is the right data gets into the right solution that adds to it, that enables what effectively is assessing and understanding and making prioritizations on threat response and threat actions based on business impact. That is huge data that comes in there that's invaluable. And that's really what drives everything to get to prioritizing the right incidents, not just incidents in general, as we all know can be the challenge, right?
Yeah, so as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking that, we always have technology that we bring to bear for security. We have process and methodologies that we bring to bear. But now I'm thinking people and roles. And the way you're describing the way your two solutions work together, it sounds like the IT people can get more of a higher role and awareness about security priorities. And the security people can perhaps get insights into making sure that the process is complete as different parts of the organization are developing and deploying services. So is that right? Do we have an opportunity here to help people in their roles through this automation and this ability to bring these products together?
Dana, you're absolutely right there, because that continuous, that threat prioritization, that breach protection, that protective measures such as shutting down endpoints and fast and comprehensive security workflows we talk about, all of that goes across IT and security. And per my comment earlier, that all adds up to enabling not just operational resilience that IT is driving for so strongly, but the cyber resilience. It is a handshake. So that shared data and those shared workflows, and putting in workflows that are part of security that reflect actual IT processes and vice versa, is what makes both more effective. And they have to be in this day and age with everything you've heard EJ and I talk about with what we face, right?
EJ, anything more to offer on this idea of roles, automation, and how your products come together?
I wholeheartedly agree with what Carl said. I think the only thing I could say is, the way I would put it is that IT and security can't be siloed anymore. They can't be their own super separate organizations. They have to get they have to get dirty in each other's world, even if it's just a little bit, because IT relies on what security operations is putting in play. And security operations can't do anything unless IT is going out there to try to help mitigate what security is finding. So they can't act individually anymore. There has to be, like Carl said, that handshake has to be there. Otherwise, it's like telling a football player to lace up their skates and go score a couple of goals.
All right. It also seems to me, as we get more granular down to the individual, when we have the ability to use microsegmentation and zero trust in order to see individual devices and users, that we can start to sort of chunk things out, right? We can look at allowing a safe environment for a set of users, or even a set of applications with a set of users, or even sets of data with certain applications and sets of users. Is that what we're starting to see? We're starting to see little, perhaps, mini communities brought into play on sort of an ad hoc basis, but that the security is enhancing those communities rather than being an afterthought or a risk.
It really comes down to, it's no longer, the communities are, like you said, communities are small. We have to do this in smaller and smaller groups. It's about being able to understand what those communities need. is really what it's coming down to in terms of how to protect them. Because you look at how even 5 years ago, the way we looked at simple things like PCI compliance was a different beast than what it is today, especially as we move more and more into how things are affecting us during a pandemic, how things are affecting us during humongous security breaches like what we found at the end of 2020. We're moving into an area to where protecting large communities can't be done easily. And it's so much easier to break those down into smaller chunks that are so much easier to bite off on and to be able to protect. Does that help? Does that go towards?
Yeah, I think that's well said, Eugene. I would add to that we're driving to the point, too, if you think about it, from our usage. And let me clarify my thought there, Dana, is around the applications. And I think that has a big impact because you can say, hey, these are applications that are critical for our customers and our organization to interact with. So therefore, anyone that has access to those, we monitor that much more closely, or they are automatically prioritized at the top of the queue if there's an incident. So I think we take it even further when we talk about those individuals. And when we group things out, we also group it by their use and the impact to the business. And again, this all contributes to the prioritization and the response that we coordinate between the two solutions, EJ.
There we go. I love it.
All right. So sort of an identity-driven model, but it's really identity-driven on steroids. It's not just individual people. It's
well said.
All of the elements that are in this environment, right? All right. Tell us about how people can consume this, whether you're an IT or a security personnel or maybe even an end user. If you're trying to protect yourself, if you're thinking about how you can do best practices as a consumer or as a servicer of IT, what should you keep in mind, and how would you start to avail yourself of what ServiceNow and Unisys have put together?
Well, I think the key here to remember, too, is we do target enterprises, right? I mean, that's where we work together, and that's where ServiceNow workflows go. So, but to your point, when we drive down to that level, because even though I am part of a large enterprise, here I sit as, going back to EG's comment, I'm essentially a lone solo office person, right? So with that in mind, much of what we need to do is remember those best practices and what would reflect in the appropriate workflows and processes that we have with our collective solutions here is one that reflects those actual individual uses and processes. It goes back to our comment just a couple minutes ago, which is what do you use most, how often you use it, when do you use it? That's very critical. And not only that, but who else is involved? So one of the things we look at when you take a look at identity, et cetera, it's who else could be impacted. That's something we haven't touched on up till now, at least not in any detail. But at the end of the day, what is that impact? In other words, if I myself am someone that just had my credentials stolen, where did I go? I need to quickly able to go ahead and do that isolation that's so capable in Unisys and be able to do that quick view into where else have you been and what are the areas of IT are impacted that I can do in ServiceNow, and then do the appropriate response that actually puts a workflow out and is automated into IT and security both, right? That's critical. So that's the starting point for where do you go when you drive it down to that level. Does that make sense, Dana?
Yeah, it does. And I think the transition we've just made in our discussion is we've talked about what you should be aware of and how you can protect yourself. But I think what we now need to consider is what happens when you're inevitably faced with some issues. And so why is speed and isolation essential? And how does ServiceNow's security incident response platform and Unisys Stealth come together to help isolate, reduce, and stifle a threat very rapidly? Let's start with you, E.G.
I love this one. So the reason speed's important is, I don't know about y'all, and y'all probably please speak up if you have. So everybody in the audience, speak up if you have. Raise your hand. How many of y'all have actually been hit with ransomware? How many of y'all have actually seen what ransomware will do if left unchecked for even just 30 minutes inside of a network? It's horrible. To me, that is your biggest need right there. Number one, when something silly happens, something detrimental happens within somebody's environment, whether it is just a regular end user or if it's on a full scale enterprise level type workflow. We're looking at speed as being a huge reason that we need a solution to work and to work well. That's one of the biggest reasons to me is it comes down to you have to be fast to be able to keep bad things from going really, really wrong. And that's one of the biggest reasons that we have come together is with stealth in an environment. Being able to sit there and number one, because again, it's doing microsegmentation. So Dana, to go back into that idea, we're building small communities and being able to protect them. We're watching the flow of what ports, protocols, who, because it is identity based, who's trying to access certain systems. We're able to watch those things. And as we're sending that information again to ServiceNow and to the pieces within it, we're able to then say, if something bad is happening on a specific system, we're able to then show that weird or bad traffic flow that's occurring, send it to ServiceNow, and allow, like in the case of a SOAR, to be able to sit there and do automated operations to help protect an endpoint or to help protect a server that bad things are happening on. That's important because the automated process is what brings it down to where within that, I think it's around like less than 10 seconds, using that automated workflow from within ServiceNow, we're able to, like we've been kind of dancing around here too, with dynamic isolation, we're able to isolate that system, cut it off from doing anything else bad within a network. That's huge. That gives us the ability to really take something that could bring down a system. Because I have seen ransomware go 30 minutes unchecked, and it completely ravaged an entire file server, which brought down an entire company for 3 days until everything could be brought back from backups. Nobody has time for that. Nobody has time for the 30 minutes it took to do something silly to cost you three days of extra work, not to mention what else may come from that. So if we can, within our abilities, just between what Stealth is able to, number one, protect, and also the information we're able to send to the ServiceNow platform, if we're able to do that, send it over there and have any type of protection in place to where we could isolate and start to remediate within 10 seconds, that's probably best for everybody, because 10 seconds worth of damage is a whole lot easier to mitigate than 30 minutes worth.
I can see now why 2 + 2 = 6 when it comes to putting your solutions together, right? So ServiceNow, you get the information from Stealth that something's wrong, but then you can put the best of what you do to work.
We do. And I think what this leads us to is automation. And how can you go ahead at that point, and what does that really mean to resolve the problem? Because there's another thing too that, probably going to those that are listening on the call here, which is, okay, great. I know I need to respond quickly. And yes, you're enabling me to do so. And yes, you're enabling me to isolate and do some orchestration that ties things up to buy my time. But how do I scale the teams that are already buried beyond belief today to go ahead and address that? That's a bit overwhelming. And here's another added wrinkle. You mentioned ransomware. And the scary part is in 2020, ransomware was paid 50% of the time versus 1/3 of the time in 2019. So this is what, our teams are facing. So with that volume in mind and with these drivers, and even putting aside pandemic and natural disasters, it really goes back to what you heard EG and I touch on a couple times here, which is that automation of security and IT success against the odds is what's really critical here. So not only to respond consistently quicker, like we're all talking and driving and want them to do, but more accurately. And they need to be able to scale. And that's where the automation kicks in. In other words, they can take on these type of volumes with the team they have today. And that's where automation is so critical. So that comprehensive tooling, so they can up the detection. They can go ahead and quickly do some of the things we've talked about with EG on the Unisys side that gives them not only more time, but allows them to be more effective as well. And then as attacks escalate, they can't just go ahead and add more people, right? This is where they need that automation to be able to scale what they have. And I'll tell you, it really pays off. We've seen some customers utilizing this that from a dollars and cents perspective, they saw a 74% improvement in time to identify. And now they go ahead and 46% of their incidents are handled by automation, freeing up over 8,700 hours annually for their team. So just wrap your head around that. I mean, that's just a huge advantage there. And that's all from putting these pieces together and being able to automate that all as part of the task, including the orchestration like EG is talking about.
Is it too soon, Carl, to talk about bots and more automation where the automation is a bit more proactive? What's going to happen when the data and the speed get even more useful in the case of the data, but more compressed when it comes to the time? Are we bringing AI? Is that the wrong way to look at it? Are we getting kind of, science fiction like here? How smart are these systems going to get?
So look, at the end of the day, my deodorant came by Amazon Droid out my window, so I don't know what to tell you. But the reality is we're already going there. And EG, I'll let you hop on here, but when we think of machine learning, artificial intelligence, we're already doing a certain amount in the products. As we leverage some of the great data from Unisys, it drives actually who will go ahead and resolve that vulnerability because they have a predetermined history of dealing with these type of vulnerabilities. So therefore, they go to top of the queue. That's just an example of being able to utilize the machine learning to essentially align the right people to the right resolution. Because at the end of the day, it still comes down to certain people doing certain things and always will. But we can use that machine learning and artificial intelligence to put those together very quickly, very accurately, very efficiently. So again, takes that time down to seconds, like you hear EG talk.
Are we going to be where we say, Jarvis, clean up the network and have ServiceNow codify that?
I hope so. I mean, again, going back to my old days of admin, I was an extremely lazy admin. And if I could have just said, Jarvis, remediate my servers, I would have been all over it. I don't think there's any way we can't move towards more automation, more machine learning. Yeah. I don't necessarily want us to get to the point where Skynet is like, no, I'm not going to delete the virus. I am the virus. That's not where we don't need that happening. But yeah, I think that by being able to automate a lot of the stuff that, just call it the mundane, resetting somebody's password, being able to pull a system offline that is experiencing some sort of weird, whatever it be, doing those types of things, that's stuff that just helps everybody go a little bit faster throughout their day. Like I'm sure a few people on the call are doing right now. If you're working a help desk, you've already got 19 people with their hair on fire begging for your attention. If you could cut off 5 of those people by automating and very easily allowing some AI to do the work for you, why wouldn't you? It just makes your life for little bits of money. I think my time is more valuable than the few dollars it's going to cost me to automate that process.
So well said, EG. I mean, that's really going to be the secret to success in 2021 and going forward is, can you scale? And the way you're going to scale is to take those mundane tasks and all those different things that can be automated and make them automated. I mean, like you heard me mention earlier, 46% of the security incidents became automated for that customer. That's a huge advantage.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, putting Jarvis aside, the more machine learning we can get into it, the better and more repeatable the processes and the workflows will be, and that much faster, right? I mean, that's ultimately what we're driving towards as well.
All right. Now that we understand the context of the problem, the challenges organizations face, how these solutions come together, I'm curious at how this actually gets embedded into organizations. Is this something that security people do, that the IT people do, that the help desk people do? Is it all of the above? Where does the traction get to, how you actually enter your solutions into actual production, actual deployment?
To me, in the way that we usually get this going is there needs to be buy-off from everybody, because there is a little bit of touch to a lot of folks. I'm willing to bet Carl's going to say similar things. Is that we've got a lot of folks who get touched by what we're doing. So it's nice to have everybody involved and some scale to have everybody's buy-in on this. It usually does start with, for us being what we're doing with microsegmentation, it does start with like a networking and security group, because they do need to talk to be able to get this rolled out. We need a little bit of more of the general IT folks, because they're going to have to install, and we want to get this rolled out to endpoints, and we need server admins involved in this as well. So when it all comes down to it, everybody's going to have to be involved a little bit, but it generally starts with the security folks and the networking folks going, how can I protect my environment just a little bit more than I was beforehand? And then rolling from there. And then Carl, all you, my friend.
Yes, I agree. So at the end of the day, this goes back to some of the comments we had, EG, which is this is a collaborative opportunity. In other words, when we look at this is the opportunity for IT and security to join together, because these really benefits both teams. And oftentimes, it actually can piggyback on investments they've already made elsewhere, right? And that's a big advantage as well. So going forward, I strongly believe and have seen the results of this being a driver towards that collaboration. It is that type of deployment that should be done in that manner. And then, quite frankly, both organizations really reap the benefit.
Wholeheartedly.
Well, very good. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. You've been listening to a sponsored BriefingsDirect discussion on how comprehensive cloud security solutions need to go beyond on-premises threat detection to significantly strengthen critical digital business services. And we've learned how a joint solution between Unisys and ServiceNow shrinks the attack surface while dynamically and rapidly isolating today's extended enterprise security threats. So please join me in thanking our guests. We've been here with Carl Klessig, Director of Product Marketing for Security Operations at ServiceNow. Thanks so much, Carl.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And we've also been here with E.G. Pearson, Security Architect at Unisys. Thanks so much, E.G.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate your time, everybody.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining this Briefings Direct Cybersecurity Innovation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host throughout this series of Unisys and ServiceNow-sponsored Briefings Direct discussions. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this along to your IT and security communities, and do come back next time.